Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this very important conversation about the future of working women. I am joined by some amazing, amazing panelists. So let me tell you about them. I'm going to make their introductories short because, as you can imagine, if I went on their accomplishments, we would be here for a very long time. First, let me introduce you to C. Nicole Mason. She was recently named one of the world's 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine. Dr. Mason is the president and CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. I will point out she's one of the few women to lead a major think tank in DC, and certainly one of the few women of color to do so. For the past 2 decades, Dr. Mason has spearheaded research on issues relating to economic security, poverty, women's issues, entitlement, as well as things such as women participating in elections and racial equity. Dr. Mason is the author of Born Bright, A Young Girl's Journey from Nothing to Something in America, and she has written literally hundreds of articles from everywhere from the New York Times to the Washington Post. She's been on CNN, NBC, to name a few. She's also a working mom and has 12-year-old twins. Linda Rabbit. I will say from the get-go, Linda has been a terrific mentor and woman role model of mine personally. She founded Rand Construction in 1989. It is one of the largest women-owned businesses in the United States. She built that construction company from, obviously she started it, so a one-person operation of her, to now a $500 million a year multi-market construction corporation. If you are calling in from your office or you're in an office today, Linda probably built it. She built ours here, and her team did a fabulous job. She sits on a lot of boards. I cannot name them all, but I will call out. For years, she served on the Federal Reserve Board and as a trustee of George Washington University. She also won a Horatio Alger Award for a program she created at Harvard Business School, teaching women to excel in business and how to join corporate boards. Welcome, both of you, Linda. And Linda has also raised 2 terrific daughters. She did so as a single mother under very challenging circumstances. Susan Stitt. Susan is part of Cigna's senior leadership team. She's responsible for shaping and steering Cigna's enterprise-wide diversity, equity, inclusion, philanthropy, and community outreach programs. It's a lot. Basically, think about it as Susan leads Cigna's efforts to recruit, retain, and develop diverse talent for Cigna's nearly 74,000 employees. She is also involved in many boards and deeply vested in her community, and is a mom of 2. Courtney Spaeth. Courtney is leading business development and corporate growth. She's one of the leading business development and corporate growth experts in the world. She has a focus on emerging technology businesses, and she has experience in both the public and private sectors. She took her experience and founded the firm Growth Period. She's helped over 250 companies. Many of them are household names, which you know. Prior to that, she served at Raytheon, where she was responsible for developing the company's homeland security business, and she brought in over $1 billion of revenue. That sounds like a lot. It sounded like a lot to me when I was reading her bio, until you read the next sentence, which is prior to Raytheon, she was at Lockheed, where she brought in $3 billion of revenue. She's also worked in the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and the White House. Courtney, thank you for your service to our country. She has 3 children and 5 dogs, and she also owns the local Sprinkles ice cream store in Potomac, Maryland, with her family. Monica Schmood, who's going to be our moderator today, is president of Cigna Mid-Atlantic. She is a true expert in healthcare. She's been for decades in the business. She oversees 1,200 Cigna employees in our area. and 1.4 million customers, of which Washingtonian is proudly one. Thank you for taking care of us and our employees. She is a mom of two. She has worked her way up the corporate ladder. She understands this topic really well, both from coming up through Aetna and then Cigna, and also from bringing women behind her as she has come up. So she will lead this conversation with her expertise. Thank you, Monica, for doing this. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such an honor to be here today. And I want to thank our audience for joining us too as we focus on the future of working women. This is a really important topic to me, to all of us on the screen, and to you joining us. Why? The global pandemic has forced the world to rethink the nature of work. We all know that. Work-life imbalance has impacted all working professionals. But I know this, and you know this, it has had an outsized impact on women. That's why we're here today. Here's a statistic. The Labor Department shows that some 2.5 million women dropped out of the workforce during the pandemic. That's compared to 1.8 million men. This exit from the workforce can be attributed to the pandemic exacerbating challenges that myself as a working woman, we were already experiencing as a result of taking on the role of primary caregiving in addition to our careers. We're doing it all. We're doing it all. We've seen burnout from working longer hours, from delaying or neglecting physical and mental health, and an increase in stress from caretaking responsibilities. We all know that. We're feeling it. We're tired. That burnout is really setting in. Now at Cigna, among our clients and our own workforce, we're seeing a significant increase in people struggling overall with mental health issues since the start of the pandemic. These are the statistics I want to cite today that really have our attention, and we're going to talk about solutions around. 1 in 4 in the workforce struggle with depression since the stay-at-home orders. Almost 50% feel lonelier due to social isolation and fewer social interactions. 30% have developed and diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. And this is the last staggering statistic. Twice as many people considered suicide in 2020 versus 2018. We all need to be aware of these challenges, and today we're going to focus on things that shine a light on it, but also things that we're going to spike out things that can be done to address them. And as Kathy mentioned, we've got some fantastic experts around the screen that I can't wait for you to hear from. Throughout the discussion today, I'll serve a role as the moderator. I'll plug in a few things that Cigna as an employer are doing and some of the things that we've learned from the clients around Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and the trends that are focusing on women in the workplace overall. I will echo what Kathy said. I have learned from each person on this screen, and I can't thank you enough for joining me here today. You've been an influence on my life as a woman in the workplace as well, and to tap into the mind that you have and experiences that you have is truly a pleasure. So let's get started. I'd like to really start with research, with the data, and then we can all kind of react and respond to it. So Nicole, I'll ask you to come off mute, and I'll start with you. So Kathy mentioned you work at the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and you focus on a variety of areas. Today, I'll ask you to focus on employment and earnings for the basis of our discussion. And so set the stage for us 2 ways. The first is the true impact, let's level set, the true impact of COVID-19 on women's employment. And then also, while I have you off mute, you please define for this audience, if you haven't heard this term, she session. You coined that, and it's getting a lot of attention. So if you tell us a little bit more about that.
So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be here with this great panel. So in January 2020, we were celebrating a significant milestone for women. Women at the time were made up 50%, more than 50% of the workforce. And we were celebrating that because we hadn't seen that particular milestone in about a decade since the last recession. By March, all of those gains had been wiped out because of the pandemic. Women lost, as you pointed out, 4 times as many jobs as men over that period. And when schools and daycares closed, women also left the workforce in significant numbers. And the reason why women were disproportionately impacted is because they were more likely to be employed in the hardest hit sectors: leisure, hospitality, education, and healthcare services. And one of the things that was really important for us to note in our work was that these were jobs that were lower quality jobs, jobs where women were not making significant wages, but also did not have healthcare insurance or other benefits like paid sick leave. So in addition to struggling to find care, women were also struggling with the fact that they didn't have benefits like healthcare to, so that they can take care of their families if they or themselves became ill. So when we were looking at the data, I kept saying something unique was really happening. And of course, women were being disproportionately impacted, and wanted to also be able to frame this so we understood who was being most impacted, which would inform our policies and strategies. And I started to call it a she session. And it's, it took a while before it caught on, and I was being interviewed by the New York Times, and I said, I think we should just go ahead and call it a she session. And I think she said, okay, and she printed it. And that's, people from the president to everyday women really have used the term she session to frame, what's been happening, but also to understand that that women have been disproportionately impacted by job and income losses in this moment.
So true. It's such a big part of what we're going to talk about today. And that's not just for women to understand, but I think businesses in general. I think about who our audience might be, managers that can have an impact, business leaders that can have an impact. As I was thinking about the she session, as you mentioned, I'm thinking about what Cigna's doing in that realm and others could potentially learn from. So when we look at our workforce at Cigna, we're 69% female. Comparatively, S&P 500 companies are about 47%, so we're 69%. And so how we aspire for that that gender parity that you mentioned in our leadership pipeline, building to those higher jobs, is that we've made a commitment that by 2024, we're going to have half of those jobs at band 5 and higher at 50%. So half of them will be women. We're currently at 45%. So we want to build that path into our executive positions. And ultimately, our goal is to have an increasing representation of women at that senior leadership role. That's one example. There's always more to do. Linda, I know there's always more to do because you've been working on this for a very long time. I'm going to come to you next. And Kathy mentioned you're a woman in a traditionally male-oriented field, construction, and thinking of there's always more to do. How have you seen gender parity reflected in your company? How have you seen it reflected in your industry, and comments that you could share with our audience about that? It's the infamous "you're on mute," my favorite saying.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Done it.
So embarrassing.
There you are.
To be the first one to be called out for being on mute. So when I started in construction in 1985, I started the first woman-owned and woman-founded construction company in Washington with another woman. And they said, gee, aren't they cute? Two cute blondes. Nobody took us seriously. It was the height of the market. Washington was just coming into its own for commercial construction. We were doing the interiors of tenant build-outs, which was considered a lighter form of construction. We weren't doing stadiums and roads and taking buildings out of the ground. And everyone just thought we were just really cute. And some people wanted to help us. And I was a single parent at the time, but it was an easier time to have childcare because there weren't restrictions. You didn't have to have a license to watch kids in the neighborhood. It wasn't particularly expensive. Many women weren't working, they were staying home. It was a nice way to have a little extra income. And My children have a harder time with childcare actually than I did, which is sort of ironic. But in my industry, credibility, of course, was just the first thing that I had to deal with. And today, credibility is still something that women have to deal with in every industry. Their credentials are always being examined. In commercial real estate in general, not just in construction, that industry really was caught flat-footed with the diversity and inclusion initiatives of corporate America. And now that it has become a business imperative, everyone is really scrambling around to try to understand what they need to do. And it is completely in flux because commercial real estate and construction was so far behind, struggling with the guidelines of how to work remotely and struggling with how to acknowledge people's hard work when they're working remotely is an even bigger problem when you're trying to promote women.
Gosh, Linda, that part about it being a business imperative, I could not agree more. I'm glad that you specifically kind of spiked that out. It feels as if companies today are having a focus on it, a more intentional approach than in the past, as you cited. Maybe a good place, I'm going to jump in here and just talk about two examples. So first, internally, how has Cigna been intentional about promoting, I talked about gender parity, but I'll talk about promoting fair pay. We benchmark compensation by role, and then we monitor those roles to make sure that there are no disparities. It's one tactical way of doing that. The second piece of it, just from an educational standpoint, to share with the audience, during the hiring process, we've eliminated the practice of asking applicants for their compensation history, taking that right off the board. So two really intentional actions that we've taken. And back to your point of it's a business imperative, things need to change, things need to be managed differently. And it might be a good time for me to spike out too, just outside of our industry, so maybe more broadly, places we can go for information as organizations. So Cigna signed something called the Paradigm for Parity. Most of you are kind of going to nod saying you know about this. For those in the audience that don't know about it, Paradigm for Parity is a national coalition, and they aim to hold organizations accountable for increasing the number of women in their senior leadership. So that's a great organization, Paradigm for Parity. The second thing, it's an action that we took. We were the first US-based company in our industry to sign the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles. And if you're not familiar with that, that also is a great resource because it offers guidance to empower women in the workplace, really in the marketplace, outside of your industry, and then in your community in general. So good references there for people to tap into. All right, Courtney, I'm going to keep making my rounds around this great, so much experience and talent in the room. Linda talked about the past, and Nicole kind of set the foundation from a research standpoint. You focus on growth, you focus on the future. And so I'd love to dig into your ideas here to talk about, what are the lessons that you've learned throughout your career, or you're also talking to, company executives on how we can help women in the workforce. What would you share with us?
Well, thank you first for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you and the panel, and thank you to Kathy. I think it's important to recognize the fundamental fact that many women opt out of big firms and big businesses and start small businesses. And so discrimination comes in many different ways, and so does progress, right? And many of those women who run small businesses, who were large company executives, now don't get access to funding. They don't get asked to sit on boards. They don't get to do a lot of things that they were able to do or network at that level when they were in a large company. So I think progress has to be made in a lot of different ways. It's changing the mindset. And I think women also have to change the mindset from settling for what I call a 90% solution, which is sort of defined as, in a big company, they have now unconscious bias training, and gender diversity training. So that's great, but then there's still the same level of incident of gender discrimination with promotions and all sorts of problems at the senior level with women trying to climb up and succeed in the C-suite. So being told, hey, we counseled him and now just work around him. That's a 90% solution. That shouldn't work for us anymore. We should be demanding 100% accountability and enforcement of this. You're putting all this money into unconscious bias training and diversity training, but you don't mean it, right? Or you've elevated some women so you can take pictures of them for your annual report cover, but they don't have P&L responsibility or aren't given real roles in the succession plans. So a lot of lip service is being paid, and that is certainly better, right? Sometimes talk comes before walk, but we've had a lot of talk now, and now we need to walk. And we work across a growth period, we work across all these different industries. And I hate to say it's pretty stable. Defense, I think, is the slowest to catch up with walking versus talking, but it's pretty consistent that everyone wants to have their woman or person of color in their chief diversity role, right? But what about their CFO role? What about their CEO succession? What about running their P&Ls? And why aren't we as women saying, look, it's not enough to counsel him, right? He's consistently unpleasant because I'm female. I get patronized and matronized. I want enforcement and accountability and a path forward without those obstacles.
Courtney, I know you're driven and you're bringing that to us today. I completely agree. Your comments are a great segue to pull Susan into the conversation. And Susan, Kathy mentioned your role. You're my colleague, just thrilled to work with you as you lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So let's respond to Courtney's comments. I know you're just dying to jump in here. Not only just talking about working women, but especially women of color. You're on, the mic is yours.
Thank you. You know what, I could have jumped in for Nicole and for Linda and for Courtney. This is my space. This is, as my kids would say, this is my jam, right? So what does that mean? It means that I've heard the word to be intentional. Like, we could talk about data all day long. And so, Nicole, as I was listening to you talk, and you said the gains that when we're at 50% in early 2020, and then we lost, and we're like at 46.9% or something right now in terms of women in the workplace. Cigna is almost at 70%. How do we do that? That also means we have to look at each band, as Monica mentioned. So what do we look like in our senior ranks? What do we look like in our senior, in our board? What do we look like across the entire organization? And then how do we put programs in place that are very, very, very intentional? And what that means is that as you think about the workplace and you think about where I am, so you mentioned that I'm a mom. My kids are 24 and 27. They don't need me quite as much as Nicole's, your 12-year-olds may need you. But I also have a mother who is aging, and I want to be there as a caregiver for her. So how do I ensure that we as an organization are putting programs that are very intentional, that help all of us across that workplace? And so we have to think about that. As we've been using the term burning out and people coming out of the workplace. They are. And why are they doing that? It's because organizations are not having real conversation. As I listen to you, Courtney, diversity training is not the be all end all. We can say all day long that I had training, but if the person still has the same behaviors that they had before they had the training, why do you have training? It's deeper than that. It's having very thoughtful, intentional conversations, having an awareness of what I need versus what Nicole needs, what Linda needs, what each individual. And oh, by the way, that is not easy to do. It helps leaders have to become much more inclusive and understanding the needs. And I'm not going to say for men or women, it's hard to do. So we as an organization have what I call inspiring inclusive conversations. We did those immediately following George Floyd, and we have continued to have those, where on a monthly basis, we have conversations that are in a safe space where you can have a conversation about, look, this is what I need to know, right? So around allyship, around what I call cultural competency. And I will throw this term out. If you don't know something, ask somebody. Find a cultural informant who can help you. And so when it comes to issues around women, we all need cultural informants, because again, you can't make an assumption that what you need is the same as what I need. So Monica, I could stop, I could go on, right? Monica, by the way, is, I love the fact that you knew all the data. Thank you, because that's what we need. We need leaders who are having that conversation, so that, Courtney, it's not just the chief diversity officer, which is part of my role. It is everyone who can have that dialogue. Don't make an assumption that because I'm sitting in the seat that, oh, by the way, I know everything there is to know about diversity, because I don't. It changes every single day. I have to be as steeped in the data as the person who's sitting across from me who is running that P&L. I have to know as much as they do about what's happening inside as well as outside our organization. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So again, Monica, thank you. I could go on and on and on. You know that,
I
but
know.
hopefully
I'm
that
coming
started.
back to you, Susan.
All
I'm
right.
coming back to you.
All
Everyone
right.
stay put. So I have so many questions, and I know you probably have questions too in the audience. I'm gonna say the chat line is open. Feel free to put your questions. I already see some multitasking like we all do every single day, every minute of every day. And I'm looking at the chats and we've got really good questions coming in. So I'm going to try to weave some of those in, and we're going to leave some time at the end for Kathy to come in and put some voice behind those questions to all of us as well. And a lot of questions coming in are the how. What are we doing about this? What are the tools and tips as companies and as individuals that we can deploy today to make a difference? And Linda, I'm going to put you on the spot. As we were preparing for our discussion today, you said something that just really stuck with me, an action that you've taken. And I thought, gosh, everyone really needs to know about this. And you said you really set a course to say, I want to help a woman every single day. I want to help a woman every day. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Sure, and thank you. So I was a school teacher by training. I have multiple degrees in English and American history. I taught school for 3 years and then went through a very terrible divorce from a very wealthy but unstable man. And I was literally with my 2 daughters out in the street, and a friend helped me get a job at KPMG as a secretary. I had never taken a bus from the suburbs to DC before. And on my very first day, I thought, okay, I'm going to spend the money to take a taxi there. So I get into the office, and the woman sitting next to me said, I see you have 2 degrees. And if you think I'm going to help you, you're crazy. You're on your own, girlfriend. That night at 5 o'clock, it was February 2nd, 1981. I was on the corner of 20th and K Street, and it was snowing, and I didn't know how to take a bus home back to my house, actually my apartment that I was renting with my 3-year-old and 2-year-old. And I started to cry. I just couldn't figure out, did it say Tyson's? Was it going to say Vienna? But I finally had to ask somebody, and I got on that bus, tears streaming down my face, and I said, universe, I'm going to make you a pledge. I am going to help another woman every single day of my life so that nobody has to have as terrible day as I've had. And I have stuck to that every single day. When I put my head on the pillow, I think about somebody that I've helped, and it makes me feel very, very like I have contributed something out of my pain, that I've made it better for other people. And I love it. I'll talk a little bit later about forming networks maybe, but I now have this wonderful network of friends, and we help each other and we support each other. And when we're burned out, we go for a walk together, and we're there for each other emotionally and intellectually. And it's just something that worked for me.
Love it.
The chat line's lighting up, Linda. You touched me with that story the first time here and again, and it's making such an impact. You're helping more than one woman today. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. You can mark that. So thank you for sharing that example. I'll come to all the panelists really with the same question about how we're helping other women, and share some examples. There's questions coming on the chat about how we do that in the workplace, but certainly in our community, at home. And so, Nicole, I see you shaking your head, so I'm going to come to you first, and then Susan and Courtney, please feel free to chime in.
So I want to tie in a few things that have been said from the opening comments to Linda's comments just now. So I think we can do a little bit more to make our work policies and practice reflective of the workforce, which is 50% women. We still have a workplace model that is very male-centered. It's like 1950s Mad Men. And so it's super competitive. It's not cooperative in the way that Linda was describing. And so in this moment, I think we have an opportunity to really think about workplaces that reflect our current reality, that are built around what women need. We know they need to be successful in the workplace. And just a small example of that is here at IWPR, like many organizations, we have the FSA flexible spending account for childcare. So you can contribute money to pre-tax for childcare. But during the pandemic, that really wasn't enough, especially when we were asking women who were often working at home, but also providing care. And so we're a relatively small company, but what we did was look out and examine our policies and thought we could do better. And so we instituted a childcare subsidy, so $4,000 to support moms and families with care. And if I don't want to take up a lot of time, but that really made a difference for our, employees, and we made it a permanent benefit. And I just want to, in terms of C-suite and how women advance. So again, we have a male-centered workplace model, which means that, you're expected to work long hours, but also take work trips that require overnight travel. And I remember at the beginning of my career, I would feel like I was paying to work because I would have to pay for overnight care as a single parent. And that money came out of my pocket, and my employer didn't really care how I got to the conference and who was watching my kids, as long as I showed up to represent the company. And so now, as the CEO, because of my experience, I said, that shouldn't be the case for working moms and working women if we say that we want them to advance in their careers and represent us. And so now that care is paid for, and that's a very small gesture, but it makes a difference and signals in our workplace that, it matters. So that's just an example that I like to share.
I know, Maka, you're shaking your head because that's like really cool, right? So I wrote that down as we get back into the scheme of travel again. And it won't just be for childcare in my mind. I think it's also for elder care or for wherever we are in that spectrum of work. I love that. Excellent.
I think it's important to address the idea that these suggestions, which are fabulous, right, need advocates in the workplace, because not everybody is fortunate enough to have a Nicole as CEO, right, or a Linda or a Monica or a Susan. A lot of us are still working for the Mad Men kind of mentality. And I think some of the questions coming in that I've seen have asked, how do women stand up for themselves in the workplace? How do we advocate for ourselves and not get hurt? And I think it's a very complex question with a very complex answer. And I think some of it has to do with our generation playing a role in fighting for the next generation, and then the next generation not giving up those gains. I've gotten to the point in my career and in my life where I don't mind fighting the hard battles. I have friends and a family, and if it means that for the next women coming, I'm making it a little easier, I'm fine with that. So if you are a woman in the workplace and you're struggling to be heard, whatever the circumstances, whether it's like Nicole said, it's benefits, or Linda said, it's just getting help from a coworker, I would suggest you try and find a more senior woman who has the right philosophy, who means what she says, who does stand up for women, and see if you can help each other. There is a sisterhood. That doesn't mean we should ignore the brotherhood. I have 2 boys, right? I have 2 sons and a daughter. And I'm equally proud of all 3 of them. And they all treat women the same, which I think is an accomplishment, right? But the older generations that are still in the C-suite, some of them struggle with this being more than lip service. And so if you can't feel like you're being heard, try and find somebody who's on the same team. And if you can't find someone on the same team or a coach, maybe you need to look at a different workplace, because right now, if you're a worker, you do have options, which you didn't have a couple of years ago. And there is more flexibility and understanding, Because some of those men have had to be home and take care of the kids, and they haven't enjoyed it so much while they're coming in during your Zoom call, right?
So Courtney, in my career, when I first started, the boys ignored me and the girls undermined me, as my story said, or betrayed me. And I had to figure out how to get beyond both of, both sides. And one of the things I learned was that every woman who wants to be a woman of achievement has to have a posse. I call it a posse. And that means people internal to your organization who will stand up for you. I could say until I was blue in the face, wow, didn't I do a great job? But boys take that as bragging. But if Courtney says, gee, what Linda just did was so amazing, we really need to credit her for that, it's a different story. So when I said I wanted to talk about networks, what I mean is you need to have an internal network of true believers, men and women, people who you help, who you've given up your time and treasure to, who will help you back. And then if you want to even go further, you need to have a posse outside of your organization. And that's where Courtney and I actually met, was through work we do in the community. And we were on a call the other day, and we were texting each other and supporting each other's point of view with 5 white males. And we won because we supported each other. So if there's anything I could leave you with, it would be reach out to people and say, I need your help. Those are the most powerful words in the English language. And good people will help you, and bad people will betray you. And at least you know where you stand.
That's true.
And finding a voice is hard, right? If you're scared, if you're shy, if you're introverted, there's never a good time to find your voice. Every day is a good time to find your voice. So if you need someone to help you, like Linda said, support you to find that voice, that's okay. You're not different than I am. I just have red hair, so I'm bolder. Right? I mean, everybody has those struggles.
It's funny, as I was listening to you, Linda, we talk so often about, and we say this to employees when they come to us and they say, look, I'm ready to move into this next level role, whatever. We say, get a mentor. Get a mentor. And so if you think about what a mentor is, or a champion, or a sponsor, a mentor is someone who talks with you. And we all need those. So you need someone who you can just unload with, right? But you also need that champion. And so a mentor is someone who talks with you. A champion is someone who talks about you. A sponsor is someone who talks for you. And so that, if you think about it in that way, that's the person who's talking about you in a room. So about or for you in a room when no one else is there. And they say, the next project is, hey, you guys, you may not know Susan, but you really should put her on that project. We all need that. And that can be a male or a female. And I think sometimes we get stuck, especially as women, we get stuck in that space of, I have a mentor. And if I look, I have a lot of people who I mentor, but I also have a few that I sponsor and that I champion when no one else is in the room. And I think we all need that. And so sometimes I get the email of, well, how do I get a champion or a sponsor? And you know what drives that a lot is the work. And you always have to be able, you got to know your work. And that's how, and you have to show up. And to your point, having those conversations, look, I am truly an extrovert. I can show up in a room and I can talk to the wall, right? I am an extrovert. But you know how much work that takes when I go home? I'm exhausted. I am mentally and physically exhausted. So then I have my kitchen cabinet, who are my girls, who I'm picking up the phone and say, let me tell you what happened today. And they say, it's okay. You need that spa day. You need that day where you just are yourself, where you can just, and I mean, not being myself, but just be able to just unleash. And we're sitting at the Four Seasons and we're drinking wine and we're just getting our nails and our toes done. Sometimes you need that group that you can have that with, but also recognize that it does take work. It does take work. My daughter is 27 years old and she says, Mom, how do I show up in a room? And I said, Alex, you're my daughter. Trust me, you're going to show up in a room. And she has that. And I'm giving her the tools, but everybody doesn't have somebody who's in their corner in that way. And I love, Linda, you doing that. finding that one person who you can help every single day. So this conversation is powerful as far as I'm concerned.
Susan, you know I'm agreeing with what you say. I'm nodding over here, and I think about sponsors and mentors. Someone said to me not so long ago, women deserve to have a whole personal board of directors. And so that's all of that support together. We deserve that. And if we take an honest look in the mirror and there are gaps in that, then we can work together to to fill those and make sure that we have those support systems all the way around.
Absolutely.
And then one thing I just jotted down, Linda, based on what you said and Courtney reinforced and amplified, is empowered women empower women. It's one of my favorite sayings. And so let's create this whole sisterhood, as you mentioned, Courtney, of empowered women so we can empower each other. Before I leave this, and I think we're going to go to the live Q&A, Nicole, I just want to come to you, just ground ourselves, and where do we go from here? We've got great tips, examples, real life stories that we've shared in the last few minutes together, but we've lost a lot of women in the workforce. And so your organization, as you lead forward, is there a possibility? I think there is, so I shouldn't make that assumption. How do we pull more women back into the workforce? And is there something that we can do to accelerate that process?
That's a really good question, and one that we have been thinking about here at IWPR. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the federal level with public policies and Build Back Better. But, to be honest, that's going to take a little time, as we can all see, for it to wind through Congress. And so what I keep saying is that employers are on the front lines. Like today, when women are thinking about re-entering the workforce, they're going to individual employers and saying, hey, I want to get back to work, but I have these other considerations, whether it's care, whether they need flexibility. So it's up to individual employers to make the way and open the path. So not only can they re-enter, but that they can sustain employment. So, I'm going back to, the top of the discussion around, the need to examine workplace policies and practices. Are they in alignment with our mission and vision? Are we doing what we can to make sure that, we're creating an inclusive and representative workplace that's, reflective of the people who are actually working. I've also, we've heard a lot about this idea of the Great Resignation, where people are leaving the workforce and, considering their relationship to work. But I, think that we should talk about, maybe instead of resignation, it's a renegotiation for a lot of workers, and thinking about, is this the workplace where I feel comfortable, where I can be my full self, where I can, feel seen and heard and valued. And so I think that is the moment that we are in. And I'm really optimistic about what's going to come on the other side.
So I say, don't complain, explain. I think when you go to your boss and you explain your situation, your going and complaining is not going to get you anywhere. But if you explain your situation, unfortunately, what's hard now for companies and corporations is they are negotiating with each person instead of having guidelines and rules and regulations. Every person is now has a different negotiation that they want to do. I want to take 2 days to work from home. I want to take 3 days. I want to work remotely. And that it's such new territory that even our HR people don't quite know how to handle these guidelines because we're so used to rules.
Thanks, Linda. Linda also, this might be controversial, but Linda once told me long ago, die before you cry in the workplace. And I believe that. I think we all cry, or I put it separately as, if you're going to cry, make sure your door is closed or you're in the bathroom, because I do think crying to a boss doesn't get you what you want. It just doesn't. But it leads to a question that one of our attendees asked, and I'm going to throw it to Susan. Susan, how, as women, how can we stand up for ourselves in the workplace? What is the appropriate way to voice our frustration? I mean, I know you have a big personality. I know you have some thoughts on this. because we all can get painted certain ways, but how do women stand up for themselves in an appropriate way?
So much of what I've heard today about empowerment and empowering others, right? So, I'm going to tell you it's a journey, right? So let's just be honest. You don't get to the place where we're all in the same place every single day. So you're going to need those people who are helping you along that pathway. So where Susan Stith has that conversation may be very different than where Alexandria Stith, again, my daughter, has that conversation. And so how do you do it? You have to find those advocates. You have to find those people who are supportive of what it is that you're saying. So if you're going to be talking policy and changes, you're not going to be the person sitting in the room with the C-suite saying, oh, I don't like this policy. You're going to have to do your homework, find some advocates, find some support, and base it on data. And so it's not just, I know people are looking for that easy solution of, okay, this is where I am today, and I want to have that conversation today. Appreciate that, but you're going to get a pushback if you're not supportive and have the meaning, you have data to support whatever it is that you're saying. So find that place. And oh, by the way, there was a study Gartner did earlier this year, and so this is real. 74% of employees want you to have a position. Think about that. 74% want you to have a position, but a third are going to like your position and a third are not going to like it. So that puts you in a really interesting place of, well, who am I catering to? And how do I cater to them? So you have to figure out, one, how it aligns to your mission, but you can't have a position on every single thing. You have to find those things that are aligned back to your mission, and find those people who are supporters and advocates that you can bring into the discussion and help you build your case, because it is building a case. We talk about the business case for diversity. There's a business case for changing benefits. There's a business case for everything we've talked about today. You have to build that case, and you have to have data to support it. So I kind of gave my political answer, but was that good? Like, it was kind of a right there, a little bit of politician there.
And you have to make a business case for a promotion.
You do.
You
do.
To make a case for yourself, right?
Yes.
I recently saw 2 promotion documents from the same company, that one was a male and one was a female, and the female said, this candidate, this person is aggressive and assertive and, driven and focused, and it was done very negatively, right? She's too aggressive, she's too assertive, she too forward thinking, she pushes. The guy's was, he's aggressive, he's assertive, he pushes, he moves us forward.
Yep.
We should consider promoting him. And I whited out the names and then put them up in a meeting with those people. And I said, pick who is who, right? I mean, you got to also watch the language that's used around you, and be careful to understand from a self-awareness perspective how you're being characterized, even if you're doing all the right things, and then help reestablish what language is okay and what are the norms. If I'm aggressive and assertive and too pushy and I'm a grower, well, what would you like me to be? Should I wear a floral dress? Do I need to carry a poodle in my purse? What will make that work for you? And if nothing will make that work, then you need to help change the vocabulary.
Courtney, what you just said is change the vocabulary. I think it's important. First, you have to have foundational knowledge of what it is and who you are as an organization. So how does your organization define diversity? How does your organization define equity? Do they understand what equity and equality and inclusion really mean? And that all people, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, regardless of our race, our gender, or ethnicity, that's to be treated with dignity and respect. Every single person wants that. I don't care who you are. And so we really have to think about what is our language and who is it that we as an organization, and what are we trying to do? And then one last point, and I promise I won't say anything else for a minute. Somebody said, well, how do you do this for people of color? So we as an organization are really intentional about our programming and thinking about how do we ensure that we have women in the pipeline? What are the programs we have? We have transformational leadership programs. We created a program this year that's called Micro Community, and it was very close to something I wanted to do. It's where everybody knows my name. It's a very small group of people, and we're putting our arms around them to ensure that they have that network, to ensure they have those leaders who know who they are. And again, it's a micro community for a very select small group of people that we are going to help nurture through the pipeline and to get them to that C-suite role. So it takes some work, though.
Yeah. Thank you all. As we come to the end of this, I want to ask you all, what piece of advice would you have for women who are currently building their careers, that are, you know, wherever they are, kids or no kids or middle, and a piece of advice for someone coming up in a small shop or in a big shop?
Believe in yourself. It's a very easy thing to get chipped away at. You know, as it Pretty Woman, the woman in the movie said, it's easier to believe the negative things. I think 3/4 of every room wants to point out something that's negative or critical or what's wrong. And it takes enormous personal strength every day to not have that chip away at what may be the right thing for you. You have to try hard, remember, to believe in yourself.
Excellent. Nicole?
I am a big proponent of building out networks and support systems, because sometimes I have to say, even in my role, I'm like, is it me or is it them? Am I crazy or are they crazy? And so having a cabinet around who can say, no, not only are you not crazy, but here's what you should do, or let's talk this through a bit. That has really been great, but also having a broad, diverse cabinet. So senior leaders as well as junior leaders who you can support, a mix of mentors as well as sponsors, because I think there's a big difference between the two. That's been really important for me in my work and my career.
Monica?
Yeah, mine is always know your strengths. Always know the kinds of things that you're good at and the things that you enjoy about the work that you do. Build your career around those strengths. Sometimes those strengths are invisible to you because they come so easy. But if you have your board of directors and your mentors, your sponsors, they can help you point them out, saying, you're really great at that, and build your career around that. And then I'll end that statement with what Courtney said, and then believe in it. Have the confidence in yourself that yes, you can be successful and really love what you do.
I know Susan, and I'm going to let Linda have the last word because she always gives a powerful word.
I love it. What I would say is look for the intersection of what you're passionate about and your profession. And when you do that, you'll make magic.
Linda, best advice?
So I have always thought that women could get further ahead if they really asked for feedback, asked for more feedback, so that they would understand the talk track that was swirling around them. You know, I've been called a bimbo, a witch, the B word. I've been called everything because people were trying to define who I was because I was so different in my industry. And so I asked for a lot of feedback, and men don't like to give women feedback because they're afraid you're either going to cry or you're going to yell, and they don't like either outcome. But if you give them permission to tell you what the talk track is around you, or the things that you need to learn about yourself, you know, understanding yourself and who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, where your North Star is probably, you know, what your values are. Those things are very important if you want to be impactful and have influence. They're the essence of your impact and your influence.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Monica and Cigna for moderating this. I think this is the best one of these discussions we've ever had, and really, really important as we help one another and we, you know, push forward. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining, and for all the people on Facebook Live who joined as well. It's very appreciative.